You got the guys working in the warehouse and all these, and the stakes are raised then because now you have, I think, the leaders of the triads or the big boss coming up. So the stakes are raised. We get to the hospital scene and the stakes are raised even more because now you got doctors, nurses, and patients, as innocent bystanders. So every sequence, the stakes are raised, which makes it that much more interesting for the audience. So, Wu did his homework. He's just not an action director. He has story, he has structure in his films, which is awesome.
And I do gotta say, man, I love the random shots of Tony sitting around with an unlit cigarette in his mouth. There's some random shots in this movie that I adore that just, they were shot because they probably thought they looked cool. But watch, movies have done that prior. They had glory lit certain actors and done that. But then if you look in the 90s, Bond was smoking well before these movies. So cigarettes were popular in movies. But so watch the way he shoots Tony in Hard Boiled. And then go watch Broken Arrow, where Travolta has a cigarette in his mouth the entire film. Like, cool cigarette smoking became a thing in the 90s.
Right.
And that didn't start with Hard Boiled, but I think some movies do help push it. And they look cool doing that. I just love, he wanted this movie to look cool, have a fun story, have two guys you like. But I think the main character is the action, would you say? Or no?
Yes, I would say yes. Yes, I would say, but it's cinema. Like, this is a good example on, you're talking about cool shots, you're talking about action, talking about structure. So this is a good example on how, as you're saying, you're bringing up other films and how there are certain things in cinema that we need to see, certain images that give us that sense of scope, right? So this epic film has it all in a sense, because that's what we're breaking down. And even has the love aspect with Tequila and his girlfriend, and the roses. Yes. So everything is there, and it's something that, for argument's sake, anybody could watch, but there's so much killing in here. I don't know if you want to have a young person watch it, but it's not a lot of gore. It's a lot of killing, but not a lot of gore in this film,
How would you explain the vibe?
Well, what do you mean?
So I watched this movie with my wife. She watches a lot of movies with me, and she's like, this movie has a very unique vibe to it. She couldn't quite put a word to it, but it's on its own wavelength. It really is. This movie is on its own wavelength, and that's what makes it so unique. But what's that wavelength? What's that vibe? Well, how would you, what's the way to explain this movie? I'm gonna give you a tough one here, but what is it? Like, what is the vibe here? What's the wavelength? Like, how do you feel when you watch it? Why do people consider this to be, aside from the action, but what does that make sense? I want to hear what you think.
No, yeah. I'm not really thinking about the action. I even tell this to my students. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's how I would look at this film. There's so many small moments, beats, scenes, sequences in this film to actually make it the masterpiece it is. And you talk about vibe. It's a highly motivated action of emotion, because what I'm sitting here thinking is that, as I said with Wu, every action sequence really has two parts. So even the tea house, when they come in and they start the shootout and Tequila slides down the staircase and shoots the guy, he actually has to go back upstairs to actually deal with the main antagonist for this scene. And this is when he rolls underneath the table with the explosion, and he has flour all on him, and he shoots the guy in the face, and all the blood shoots up in his face, right? So there were two parts to that. There were about 3 or 4 parts to the hospital scene, right? And where the stakes raise. So it's not more or less an action-driven film. I think it's an emotional-driven film pushed by the action.
Oh, all right. Yeah, that's a great point. Don't they have that conversation during the gunfight where they're saying, after all this darkness, life should be about fun? Like, doesn't he say that line? Like, it's always light?
I'd have to go back and check that, but I'm not sure. But yeah, that would be my take on it. It's an emotional roller coaster. The roller coaster is the film, but the action is, you sitting inside that little car, and it's taking you on this highs and lows. You know, the action is the highs and lows because you got extremes. You got fierce gun battles, and then you have Tequila and his girlfriend in the police station, and she's getting these roses, and he's singing to her, right? I think there were scenes where he's singing to her. So yeah, it's just a roller coaster of emotion. So I mean, vibe, yeah, that's my take on it.
And then they go and they put cotton swabs in about 50 babies' ears during a major gunfight.
Yeah, it's something.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's what it is, though. You know what I think? There's many action movies that come out that don't have personalities.
Mm-hmm.
They sure you can put it on and have a fun and brainless action film, but this one, like you said, with the roses, the singing, the weird codes that they plug in, the putting cotton swabs in babies' ears, the Mad Dog becoming somewhat good, living by a code, the Tony getting electrocuted. And the flashbacks of all that happening. Mm-hmm, this movie has a personality, and I think the best action movies have their own distinct personality. And I think you're right. A lot of it is fueled by emotion, and a lot of it's a really interesting combo that I don't think he was ever able to match with any of his American films. He tried it with Face Off, and maybe he was successful because you have switching faces, and you have different families, and Gina Gershon, and the kid, and the song. But I think it's really successful in this movie, just the way that they capture all that. But no, I love it. It's just
I just think this is a great piece of cinema where, I mean, you label it in the action genre, but it has so many important pieces to make it what it is. So as we said, emotion, we said great action films. So if we sit here and we think about the great action films that have personality, I think Die Hard had personality, right?
Yeah.
I think Fury Road had personality. And when I mentioned Heat, even though Heat is a drama, you know, it's a crime drama, the action sequences in Heat, there weren't a lot, but they were great, you know, when you had them. I think The Great Escape had a lot of personality.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I think Hard Boiled is on that list of great films with personality, but there's no film that I just mentioned that could match the gun, I guess, choreography. None. The dancing, as you said, none. Not even John Wick for everybody. And John Wick is a good.
It's tactical. It's a tactical.
Yeah, it's a very tactical film. Yes, this doesn't feel like that. This doesn't feel tactical.
They call this a bullet ballet.
And I agree.
And before we get out of here, I just want to pitch something to you. So we were talking about Mad Max Fury Road. That movie has Rictus, who at the end is kind of this secondary antagonist. Then in this one, you have Mad Dog. In Lethal Weapon, you have Mr. Joshua. And you brought up a couple others, but I've already forgotten. Lethal Weapon, or Die Hard, you have the blonde guy, who's the secondary badass. It's a really interesting. The Raid has Mad Dog. I mean, it's really John Wick 3 has the secondary guys next to Dacascos. It seems like there's a pattern going on here where the antagonist has a right-hand man that they have to get through before they get to them. And I think that's like a trait in some of these classic action films. Would you say?
I would say yes, and I think I understand the math behind it. When your lead, you have your antagonist, and your antagonist, as it's said in writing, the greater your antagonist, the better the struggle is for your protagonist, and the more that your audience actually can put themselves in the protagonist's shoes. So they become more invested in the protagonist because they know the struggle and the journey he's going to have to go through to beat this villain. As Batman and Joker, right? We love Batman, but in essence, Batman is no match for the Joker. He's just not, you know? And when we talk about these villains, these great villains, they need a sidekick or a hitman, you know, to lead up to the anticipation, because if the protagonist just goes straight to the antagonist and defeats him, you know, maybe we won't be as satisfied. We need more. All right. But the lead antagonist, he has to die last. You know, he has to die last.
Desperado, you have Danny Trejo as the knife thrower.
Right, right. Uh-huh.
It's good to have
Right,
these secondary.
right.
It's a I don't
So
know.
he was just a hitman, but he was lethal. He was lethal. Even when you talk about the Matrix, you had Agent Smith, which they had to carry
Oh
over.
yeah, yeah.
They had to make sure that, and he wasn't the lead antagonist. He was in essence, but the lead antagonist for the Matrix, he was like Oz from the Wizard of Oz in a sense. But these great action films, and then we didn't talk about the Matrix because I think the Matrix has some pretty good shootouts.
Oh yeah.
And the first one, some pretty good ones. So missed that one.
I just remembered this though, but Wu in his films, you have Hard Target where you have Lance Henriksen as the main heavy, but his sidekick was the guy from The Mummy, Arnold Vosloo. He was so good in it. And then Broken Arrow, you have Howie Long, who was a secondary guy that I liked Howie Long in that. And then in Face Off, you had the secondary guy as well next to the main villain who was working for, I forget, Will Patton maybe?
I know you're talking about, I know his name, but I can see him.
That's something Wu has always done, but I think it's smart. It's smart to have that.
It works, and it's worked in every one of his films. And like you said, I like the Hard Target, the villains in Hard Target.
Yes.
Lance and who was the other guy's name?
Arnold Vosloo.
Yes, and he had the accent, and which was probably his accent when they were in New Orleans. But the whole backdrop for that film was perfect. New Orleans was a really good. That was another good.
And it's sweaty, It's a sweaty movie, and it should be sweaty, and I love it. So
it's no hard boiled, but it's a pretty good film.
Yeah,
it's no hard boiled. Hard boiled.
Yeah, I mean it's. I don't think it wanted to be hard boiled, but he didn't. He wanted Kurt Russell for that movie, not JCVD.
Really?
I think so. Yeah.
See, incorporating the martial arts with that film, with the gunplay, did it work? Because I'm sitting here thinking about the other films Wu did, and I don't think there's martial arts to the degree of Hard Target in any other of his films.
No, you have the bad fist fight at the end of Broken Arrow.
Yeah.
Where they're boxing.
Yeah, that was good. That's a good action movie. So we're talking about just pure action, adrenaline. I think Hard Target is good, but still, like I'm saying, there's no film for me action wise that stands up to Hard Boiled. And Fury Road is a different kind of action for me. We're talking about vehicles and strong storyline and really no dialogue for Fury Road. Hard Boiled, the dialogue carried the story along. The relationships carried the story along. The emotion, two different kinds of action, but just both very good action.
Oh, I love it. Well, I'm glad you brought this up, man. I'm glad we talked about this. This was a good one.
Oh, this is awesome, man. Always an awesome time with you. But, we picked some great ones, and this is one of the greats.
What are we doing next?
It's a toss-up because we brought up Heat.
Oof.
Yeah, and then we had brought up something else a few weeks ago, and I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah, well we had Bullet. We were maybe talking about.
We said Bullet.
I'll let you pick because you haven't gone wrong so far. So I'll let you. We'll figure it out. We won't do it yet.
Yeah,
but
we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Good. Yes. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, man.
Hey man, thanks for having me, Mark. I always love talking film with you, man.
All right. So for me, Mark Hoffmeyer, and for Hakim Robinson, this is Movies, Films, and Flicks. We'll see you next week.